I used to think that investing was hard, boring, or complicated, but I found the perfect stock investing course that showed me how to invest as a complete newbie. Now I can build wealth in the stock market and do all the things that I enjoy at the same time. Check out the Lazy Investor Stock course and get started on your wealth building journey today.
How's everybody doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. And so, what we're going to talk about today is this idea of you have been lied to about the real value of your eggs and your uterus, right? And what I'm going to really try to explore is the fertility industry, some of the numbers around the fertility industry, but also some of the supply and demand economic forces around the fertility industry, because I think that there's a misconception, but especially on social media, that women can leverage relationships and they can leverage power in the relationships kind of based on rationing off access to their uterus and also rationing off access to their eggs and trying to maybe use their eggs as uterus as a way to kind of maybe improve their economic mobility. The idea of the where if a man gets access or if a man, or I'm sorry, let's say maybe you develop a relationship with somebody and the result is a child, that you should be afforded some level of economic mobility because your eggs and uterus have some level of value, right, in the marketplace. And so what we're going to kind of do is examine that particular industry, because what I noticed with a lot of these particular discussions, there's a real lack of economic education. So it kind of creates a lot of, I would say, I don't know how to put the proper word, but I don't really think it's really rooted in how the real world actually works. And I don't want a lot of people, most importantly, women, walking around with the wrong perception or a misunderstanding of how the actual world actually works and how economic forces actually take place, right? So that's what we're going to get into. And I would encourage you to share this all out to your friends and family that may have had some of these same ideas, because maybe they're listening to people on the internet, but they're not really getting a kind of thorough economic discussion, because we're really going to kind of go into why markets are created and what justifies them, how producers and actual buyers conduct themselves inside the marketplace. And so when you're talking about the idea is that I'm going to leverage relationships and I'm going to auction off, right, access to my eggs and uterus, well, then now you're going into the marketplace, and then you have to really understand how buyers conduct themselves in the marketplace. So if you're selling your eggs and uterus, right, then how do buyers conduct themselves in the marketplace? Because they're going to be the people that are going to be buying access to your eggs and your uterus, right? So that's something that we want to talk about. So really quickly, I want to thank Terrence S., but also Dr. K for being new channel members. We got the channel membership up. We got Tiger Shark level, Hammerhead level, also got the Megalodon level. Want to really encourage you to look at those membership levels. I know for a fact it's going to provide a lot of benefit to you if you're at your different levels. And in every level that you're at, you get everything underneath that particular level. So if you're at the top level, you get everything underneath. You're in the middle, you get everything underneath that. And then if you're also at the Tiger Shark level, you get a lot of really good content that's going to be segmented just for you. That's going to be on my wall. You're also going to get shout outs in a particular live stream. So I want to really encourage you to look at the membership levels, right? So let's go ahead and get into it, right? Because I don't want to be here real long. What I want to really tell you, or what I want to ask you, right, is what is the real value of your eggs and uterus? Okay. What is the real value of your eggs and uterus? So if you've been made to believe that your eggs and uterus have a value, well, how do you determine that value? Have you asked yourself that question? So in the real world, when we step off the internet, how do you determine the value of your eggs and uterus if you believe that they have a value? So if you believe that relationships should kind of be based on the value of your eggs and your uterus, then what is the value? How do you determine it? Can you put a number on it? Like, how does that work? What's the criteria? So when we're looking at a stock, we're looking at a home, we're looking at a car, we can have a process to value this, right? When you go and get your home appraised to try to figure out what your refinance is going to be, there's a way to get that determined, right? There's maybe a formula they use. Some of it's going to be subjective, but there's some type of way. Some of it's going to be qualitative, but there's some type of way they come up with a number, right? If you're putting a value on your eggs and uterus because you believe that your eggs and uterus is going to be the vehicle to create economic mobility for you, so then what is that value? Can you give me a number? And so when we ask these questions, we often find that people can't answer them because they never kind of thought of it from that level. So I'm not against you believing that. What I'm asking you is that you should probably come into the marketplace informed, knowing what your value is. So let me give an example. If I'm looking to sell a car, let's say I got a car, what I would do is I would go look at the blue book value. and I would say based on my car, the model, the year, and based on what condition I think my car is in, then I would attach a value to it based on what the book says. Then I could come up with my own value. I may feel like, well, you know what? I can maybe sell this for $1,000 over what the blue book value is because I'm just that good of a salesperson, right? That's how I would look at it. But what I wouldn't do is take my car and not have placed any value on my car and then go into the marketplace, but have a perception that I'm going to better leave the marketplace with some type of financial gain because I haven't placed a value on it. So if you're going to play the, I would say, transactional game of putting a value monetary on your eggs and uterus, I would really encourage you to come up with a number. Because then once you step into the marketplace and you know what you're aiming for, as opposed to hoping everything works out, because I wouldn't look to sell a car and not have a price on it and just hope somebody gives me the right amount of money. Now, if you're not playing that game, this video is not going to be for you, right? Because everybody's not playing the game of that they believe that their uterus and their eggs has a monetary value. But so now once you start playing that game, you start really coming into the marketplace. What you're doing now is you're playing a different type of game because you're playing the game with savvy people that really understand how to build markets, how to facilitate markets, how to support markets. They understand how buyers and producers conduct themselves in markets and things of that nature. So that's kind of what we're going to get into. So really quickly, what we want to talk about first is how buyers and sellers conduct themselves in the marketplace, because I think that's really, really important. Because I think if we don't have that foundational piece from an economic standpoint, then it's going to be hard for us to build any other thing off of that, right? So we're going to get into that video, and then we're going to go ahead and move on from there.
Show how buyers and sellers, respectively, respond to changes in the price of a good. In this lesson, we'll show you how the interactions of buyers and sellers determine the price. Let's start with the punchline. The equilibrium price is the price where the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied, right here. And this is the equilibrium quantity. Why is this the equilibrium price? At any other price, forces are put into play that will push the price towards the equilibrium price. It's kind of like a ball in a bowl, where the ball always returns to one stable position. The equilibrium price is the only place where the price is stable. To see why, the first thing to understand is that buyers don't compete against sellers. Buyers compete against other buyers. A buyer obtains goods by bidding higher than other buyers. And sellers compete against other sellers by offering to sell at lower prices. Think about it. At an auction, the buyer with the highest bid gets the item, and the seller with the lowest price makes the sale. So let's say the price of oil is currently $50 a barrel. That's above the equilibrium price of $30 a barrel. At $50 a barrel, the quantity supplied is more than the quantity demanded. So we say there is a surplus. So what happens? It's sale time! When there's a surplus, sellers can't sell as much as they would like to at the going price, so sellers have an incentive to lower their price a little bit so they can outcompete other sellers and sell more. The price will continue to fall until the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied and equilibrium is reached. Now, let's say the price is less than the equilibrium price, say $15 a barrel. At $15 a barrel, the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied, a shortage. And what happens now? When there's a shortage, buyers can't get as much of the good as they want at the going price, so they compete to buy more by bidding up the price. And now, since buyers are easy to find, sellers also have an incentive to raise the price. The price will continue to rise until quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied and equilibrium is reached. At any price other than the equilibrium price, the incentives of the buyers and sellers push the price towards the equilibrium price. Only the equilibrium stable.
Okay, so this is a really good video talking about buyers and sellers and also equilibrium prices, right? So the first question we want to kind of ask based on this particular framework, right? So if we're operating under this particular impression that I can leverage my vagina, I can leverage my uterus and my eggs for economic mobility, okay? The question I would ask is, do you believe there's a shortage on eggs and uterus in the world, right? Or do you believe there's a shortage on being able to facilitate pregnancy, right? So if somebody has this particular economic assumption, my question would be, what information, and sorry for the typo, would be what information informed you that there was a shortage on women's eggs or the uterus of a woman? So if I'm framing a relationship to where I really am not in love with this person, I really don't like this person like that, there is no larger relationship goal or dynamic. I'm here because I'm going to leverage access to my uterus and my eggs. as a way to create economic upward mobility for myself. And that's the assumption that they're operating under. My question would be, what informed you, or where were you informed that there was a shortage on women's eggs or the uterus of a woman? So let me give an example. If there's a population of 50,000 men and there's only 10,000 women, that's a different scenario because there is a shortage, right, of women's eggs or the uterus of a woman in that particular environment. So we look at a particular population, and it's difficult for people to get outside of that population and get access to new people. There's not a lot of movement of people in and out of that particular population, right? There's 50,000 men, there's 10,000 women, right? Then the assumption that there is a shortage of women's eggs in the uterus of a woman makes sense in this particular population, this particular ecosystem, right? But the way the world is now, to where there's a lot of cross-border transit, especially in the West, right? There's a lot of cross-border transit. People not only move out of states, but they move from country to country, right? The world is a lot smaller than it was, let's just say, even 30, 40 years ago. Why would you operate under the assumption that you are in a relationship with somebody, but there's nothing deeper than just the fact that you're trying to transact? Do you believe that the particular buyer of what you're selling is not aware that there's a larger market out there for what you're selling? Right? So you may have an information advantage to where this person doesn't have the information around a particular situation. They may not know that they can access this in other parts of the world. So then they may feel forced to do business with me. Is that what you're operating under? But so really, like, if you really try to play this out in the real world, so that's the questions you would ask, because I think that you could end up in a surprise if you operate under these economic assumptions, and then you really understand that there's a larger world for what you're trying to sell than you may be aware of. We'll go ahead and get into that. So if we're going to play the game of my reproductive organs have a monetary value, and I'm going to be able to use that monetary value to create economic mobility in relationships, because I really am not into the person. I don't really have a larger relationship goal. I'm just here to try to figure out how I can extract a monetary transaction out of this other person, because they're going to access my eggs or my uterus. So then the question would be, what have you priced that deal at? What have you priced that offer at? And then can somebody get that same offer at a different price point? And so we're going to kind of go into that. But those are some of the kind of questions you should ask yourself if you're choosing to look at things from that particular perspective, just kind of based on my own opinion, right? So what I want to really inform people is that once you put a monetary value on your sexual organs, many of you are playing a game you're not trained to play. If you don't understand supply and demand, if you don't understand price equilibrium, you're playing a game you're not trained to play. Now, again, you could be fortunate enough to run into somebody that is as uninformed as you, right? Or they may not have the same level of access as you, yada, yada, yada. But here's the question. If all of those things are true, what type of economic support do you think you could get from that person? So if you're going after people that are totally ignorant, they don't understand how things work, yada, 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 what kind of economic mobility could that person provide for you? So these are some of the things that you got to kind of work yourself out, right? Because once you take this off the internet, you play it into the real world, now you're kind of actually interfacing, you're exchanging in different economic systems that actually work in the real world. So let's go ahead and get into that, right? So what we want to talk about really quickly, really good article I was sent, High Price of Fertility. Bloomberg put this out. Forgot what year this is, 2024, so it's relatively recent, right? So we're talking about how women in different parts of the world where there's a market for eggs, right? And so this goes on all over the world. We know, and most people that are informed know, there's a market for organs, right? Kidneys, eggs. Let me see what else. It eventually will be your eyes, eventually. I'm not sure what else I can think of because I'm not in that market, right? But there definitely is a market for organs, okay? So eggs would be one of the organs that they've developed a market for, right? So we got this first woman, young girl in India, right? She's going to sell her eggs for around $180 USD, right? That's the cost of her eggs. She's 13 years old. Okay, so that's one market for eggs, okay? Then we roll down later into the article. There's a woman in Buenos, how you pronounce that particular word? Is it Buenos Aires or Buenos Aires, right? She was paid $35,000 for a donation of 43 eggs, right? Okay, so that's $35K for 43 eggs. Okay. Then we have another woman in, I want to say, some part of Asia, and she was paid $160,000 over 11 cycles, and she sold about 333 eggs, working with 4 agents, 4 clinics, 2 egg banks, 9 Chinese families, right? And so what you have is you have an industry around women who fit certain markers, fit certain criteria. They now can go and interface this market and go sell their eggs. And then those eggs kind of get sent to different people that have a demand for those particular eggs. So you may see that 160 as a lot of money. It's going to be relative to where this person lives, because we saw the woman in India made 180, right? But then the money that's going to be made off these eggs in these particular ecosystems is going to be a lot greater. But there's a demand for these eggs. Okay, let's go to another. We're talking about in vitro fertilization. So this particular market, right, is estimated at USD 25.34 billion. And it's projected to hit USD 43.57 billion by 2033. Here's the growth of the particular market we've seen since 2023. It's just gone up, right? So we see that this in vitro fertilization market is projected to continue to grow and grow and grow as we start going into the next decade, which means what? There's more demand for it. So we're having suppliers come in and meet the demand and try to find price equilibrium. Okay, we got IVF costs in this particular Atlanta market, right? Consults $289, IVF cycle with fresh embryo transfer $17K, IVF freeze $12K, IVF freeze $16, $5, $23, $19. A lot of this is not covered by insurance. So currently right now, some people that have the ability to pay, but we find that people are so willing to pay so they can put themselves in a position to become pregnant. They're willing to pay what the suppliers are charging. So there is a market for this. Fertility space, specialization in a particular area. If you're good at it, you're going to make a lot of money because there's so much passion around it. People really want to conceive. They're willing to pay what it costs. Right? So we've actually put numbers around this. Here's another article about the surrogacy space, right? Commercial surrogacy industry is booming as demand for babies rise from March 7th, 2023. Global commercial surrogate industry estimated $14 billion in 2022. By 2032, the figures forecast to rise $129 billion. Okay. We see the movement, global estimated market 2023. So 2018 is continuing to go up. There's a lot of Hollywood actresses that had their children through a surrogate. They never had the child. There's a really famous Black actress. She had 2 children. Both of them came through a surrogate. She never had her children, right? 2032 forecasts, the figures forecast to rise to $129 billion because of infertility issues, growing number of same-sex couples, and single people looking for ways to have babies. The demand is driven primarily by so-called intended parents in wealthy Western nations, right? And so as we get farther down, we're seeing that in certain markets, the West is creating a demand for these particular markets to be surrogates. So there's a big market in Ukraine right before the war, right? That was considered a less expensive market than Mexico and I think another part of the country. So that's why a lot of people went there to access that market. The war kind of tore that market up. So now they moved to another Eastern Bloc state. I wouldn't say Eastern Bloc. I kind of dated myself with that. Another Eastern European state called Georgia, right? So in Georgia, as in Ukraine, the programs cost 40 to 50,000. In Mexico, they're around 60 to 70,000. That compares with an average of 120,000 and higher in the United States. So there's so much demand for this particular service that they've created in other countries. And also because of the exchange rates, things of that nature, they're less expensive in these other countries. So what's going to eventually happen is the U.S. market for this is going to get undercut. Because if I can go to the Ukraine or Georgia, right, because this war eventually will be over, or Mexico, and essentially it's going to get cut in half. But I believe in what they're doing there, and I believe there's a level of safety, reliability, yada, yada, yada. U.S. market's going to get undercut. So again, you got to kind of ask yourself, when you start saying, well, I'm going to price out my eggs and I'm going to price out my uterus, and I'm going to try to use this as a way to create economic mobility, there's other factors going on. There's markets that have already been created for that. So if there's no real relationship there, it's just transactional, then the question again starts to ask yourself, what is the real monetary value of what I'm bringing to the marketplace? Okay. Then we also got the sperm bank industry, right? Market Insider said it's worth 4.5 billion by 2027. Okay. Cost adjusted growth rate of 2.2 over 2020 to 2027, which we're almost there. With 27% of the global market, China's forecast to be 4.3% over that same period. So what we really want to try to really get you to understand is that there is a very robust and growing market for these particular type of services. We got the egg game. We got the surrogacy game where people are getting access to another woman's uterus. This becomes very attractive to certain women because of their economic situation. We have this now being outsourced to Eastern Europe, Mexico. I believe that those markets eventually will outpace the U.S. market just because of price points, right? We got the sperm donation market getting larger and larger. So again, you want to kind of ask yourself, what information inform you that there's a shortage on eggs and a woman's uterus? Because if there's not a shortage on it, then how can you now start to demand a certain price point? How does that work? So it maybe needs to be something else that you're looking to sell in the marketplace if you're looking for buyers. Because the question again starts to ask yourself, what is the behavior of buyers in the market if I'm looking to sell something? Because the only thing that's important is how buyers are conducting themselves if I'm looking to sell. It's going to be very difficult for me to dictate to buyers, especially if there's not a shortage of what I'm looking to sell. Okay, so we're going to go into another video because I'm going to kind of show you how the market is looking at these fertility critics. They're looking at it as a growth space. And then we're going to go ahead and wrap this up.
Well, suffer from an infertility problem. The United States is not yet at the growth zero, but soon there will be a problem that there are not enough children being born, and something it has to give. And I think the investors, they saw that, they did a full study, due diligence, and they want to be prepared for the opportunity of offering services and perhaps have a good return on their own investment.
Egg freezing was considered experimental for many, many years, and initially the success rates were not very good. Most insurances do not cover egg freezing. The cost ranges from $8,000 to $12,000 for the medical piece, and then medications can easily be a few $1,000s more.
We do about, in the United States, 250,000 cycles of assisted reproduction per year. And this, unfortunately, only reflects a small percent of women that really need the service. The importance of providing services in a more accessible fashion is enormous, because we are only serving about 30 to 40% of couples that need our help. The other 60% simply cannot afford, because in their state, infertility is not a covered benefit.
Most insurance companies do not cover egg freezing. In the Bay Area, a lot of the tech companies have started to do it. Sheryl Sandberg was one of the people that really pushed it. She had an employee who had cancer and wanted to freeze her eggs, and it wasn't a covered benefit. So she went to Sheryl, and Sheryl said, well, of course that should be something covered. She said, well, we should be covering egg freezing for anyone.
If we can render the services more accessible, there will be an increased number or an increased volume of patients that need to be treated. And I think that the investors saw this type of opportunity. Private equity firms, they start to provide funds to acquire fertility clinics, to acquire egg banks, in order to provide these services in a more standardized fashion, and also to expand and offer the services in areas that are not yet well served.
Down the road, we may have some other options. I'm hoping that being able to make eggs in the lab from stem cells may be an option, and that would be useful for a whole range of patients. So cancer patients, older women, even a male patient, could produce eggs that way.
Okay, so what I kind of wanted to show you is that private equity is looking at this particular space, and there's a lot of information online about private equity and what the actual returns can be from a fertility clinic and egg bank, things of that particular nature, because they see the growth. They see there's a large amount of the market that's being underserved, right, or not being served at all. So again, if you're trying to transact this way in a relationship, I really want to encourage you to start pricing things out, kind of get out of TikTok, YouTube, fantasy land, and really start asking yourself, can I actually put numbers around what I believe the value of my eggs are and what I value my uterus is, if that's going to be the only relationship dynamics that I'm going to kind of maybe try to use to leverage some level of economic mobility. And that's all we're going to talk about. So hope this was valuable to you. Hope you got some benefit from it. But just kind of really want to kind of go into this particular topic because I thought it was very, very interesting to me. And I always like to kind of go into a lot of things that are leading on the internet, kind of whatever the trend of the story is, and see, can we try to put some type of economic structure around it to help people get a better understanding of it from an economic standpoint. So they're not just moving around the particular world uninformed with their heads up in the cloud. So we're going to read the comments. Anybody got any questions, disagreements, anything of that nature? Here's your opportunity to come on through, and then we're going to bounce up on out of here. Question, comments, or disagreements. Let me bring that invite in, and then we're going to get out. That's pinned. Okay. So anybody want to come through, let me know. That's pinned in the chat. My bad. So Raygun, man, appreciate $2 super chat, bro. Appreciate you coming through, being a mod. All my mods that came through early, if you're still on, appreciate it. And we're going to get up one out of here if we don't have anybody coming through. So Miss Farida James, what's up from Salt Lake City, Utah? Pascal, what's going on? Dr. Chaz, what's up with it? I know you had a good Friday, the way that spy was moving. Miss Mosley, what's going on with it? Jarrell Davis, what's up? Girls with Pearls, what's going on? Ramel Stanley, what's going on? GC, what's up with it? Miss Brandy, appreciate it, Miss Brandy. Miss Ty says, great perspective, understand the value, what you want to offer to the market. Yeah, I think people got to price out what they claim they want to sell to somebody else. Actually come up with a number if they're looking to get a number back. So kind of beware, like I said before, as I go to a car auction, I'm looking to sell a car, but I don't know what I'm looking to get for it. And I need to actually put a price on it. I shouldn't be going and hoping that somebody does me a favor. So if I'm looking to sell a car in the market, I need to kind of understand what price I've put on this particular car. And then also would a market bear that price unless it's an unusual circumstance, right? That often can be done from going to places like Blue Book, looking at what that car's worth. Same thing with a home, same reason why you get the home appraised, to kind of understand what's the value from a monetary standpoint based around this, right? So if this is the game that a woman decides that she wants to play, that's cool. I would really encourage her to try to put a value around what she believes, right? Her eggs and her uterus, what actual value they actually have in the marketplace. What's the number? What are you looking to get from somebody getting access to them if you actually want to put them up for auction? And I'm not coming in with any judgment. If that's what you decide you want to do, that's cool. I just would encourage you to put a number on it so that you can kind of know what you're aiming for. So it says women in poorer countries going after this service as a means to move up economically. I don't think they're doing it to move up. I think they're doing it to survive, right? So I think in places like India, so in this particular example, this woman did it in India based on this particular story. She did it to buy a smartphone. So she wasn't doing it to move up economically. She got $180 USD, right? She did it to buy a smartphone, okay? So in that scenario, it really wasn't a move up. It was just, I wanted to buy this particular item. I was approached and I can sell my eggs. She's relatively young, right? So it was something that she was able to make. In this particular scenario, this woman made $35,000 in Buenos Aires. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I don't know how far 35 USD goes in this particular country, but I wouldn't believe that she could live off this the rest of her life. So yeah, it's money, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say move up economically. What I would say is that it's a way to provide some income to you. But I don't even think in that country that's enough for you to live off for the rest of your life because you got a one-time cash payment of $35,000. Even this other woman in what part of the country is this? I think this is Taiwan. Let me see. Yeah, Taiwan. She made $160,000, right? I don't know the cost of living in Taiwan, but that I wouldn't assume that's enough money for you to live off the rest of your life, right? So I just think it's a way to generate income because there's a market there for it. And then the same thing with the women that are doing the surrogacy, right? there is something in this particular and something that's talked about in industry, right? The doctors take 50 grand, 60 grand from the parents, and they give 12 to 20,000 to the surrogate mother. So the doctors are taking what's in the middle. Many people believe that the surrogate mothers are underpaid, but in a lot of markets outside the United States, they don't have an opportunity to make money doing anything else. So they're taking what they can get, right? So it's not a way to move up economically. It's really just a way to create income. They're not getting paid, $10 million for access to their eggs or to their uterus. It's not that kind of market, right? But that's a great question. So anybody want to come through, questions, comments, disagreements, right? Let me know. So Miss Brittany says, when you was in college, women was listing for $46,000 for one successful transfer. That was in 2006. I feel you. Big up to Miss Brittany. Yeah, so you know what I'm saying, Brittany, that's, it's a nice little piece of money, but it's not like, you balling out of control if you get 46 grand, right? Even in 2006, but it's a nice piece of money, to pay some bills, to pay off student debt if you got that. And I'm not talking about you personally. If a person has student debt, to pay that off. So it's, it's an opportunity. Ms. Ty says many women are driven to take advantage of this and means of survival. So there's not likely a shortage the way we've been marketed. Well, Ms. Ty would ask anybody. So I'm not talking about you personally. I would just do the numbers. How many women are in the world, right? So when are a woman's eggs viable for pregnancy? Like around what age? How many women do we think are in the world that represent that number, right? So we can just create like a boundary, right, between women where their eggs are viable and women where their eggs are may not be viable. That's a pretty wide bound, and how many women fit within that particular bound. So that's the population of women, right, that are able to get pregnant, right? And their eggs are what we consider viable, right? So we have a relatively wide bound. On the outside of it would be really, really young women and much older women. So that's going to be literally billions of women, right? So where I don't understand when anybody would assume that there's a shortage, but again, the internet a lot of times is a fantasy world, right? It's not the real world, but people kind of take information and they assume kind of like, okay, I can play this out in the real world. I'm not sure that it'll work that way, but if somebody can find a unique situation, it maybe will. But again, I would just tell somebody to start pricing it. But I don't think there's a shortage because there's not a shortage of women. So we talked about earlier, if I'm in an ecosystem or a habitat or an environment, and it's 50,000 men, but 20,000 women, it's a different dynamic, right? But in a lot of places, there's sometimes more women than men, or sometimes the men to women ratio is relatively similar. So then there won't be a shortage, right? And then with women, especially at a certain age, having a lot of eggs, they'll sell them and still have eggs left over for themselves. So that's kind of what created this market. Well, a woman can sell her eggs and still have eggs left over because of how many eggs she has inside her body. So it's not like, there's a shortage of any circumstances, right? So I wouldn't look at it that way, but everybody got a way to look at it. But I appreciate your comment. So Ms. Brittany says most females didn't know about this market. Those who are engaged in the market were paying for school. I feel you. Yeah, I pay some school bills. I feel you. Yeah, I've heard of it for a very long time, right? Also heard of, like I said, surrogates. Because I knew, like I said, there's a lot of Hollywood actresses have used surrogates to have children. They just don't always tell people, but they did. So I've known about these particular spaces for a really, really long time. And then when I worked in blood component manufacturing, we had a additional arm of our business that was in this particular space, because a lot of the technology around freezing was very similar to how we freeze blood, to how they freeze in this particular space. So they had kind of built like a separate business based around that. So I was exposed to this, and this was around the same time you're talking about. This was like 03 or 04 or 05, right? So they was kind of going into that particular space. So that's kind of where I got a little bit more aware of that. So we're talking about now over 20 years ago, right? So it's been around a minute, but it's had a lot more advancement, I would say, in the last 10 years. And it's gotten a lot more, I think, available to more people, and a lot more people see it as a solution to their problem. And I just think it's going to grow over time. I don't see it contracting because of the demand for these particular services, right? So we got so many producers coming into the market to provide solutions because of the demand, because now you start talking about private equity looking to invest, is because they see a lot of profit there, right? Okay, so it looks like that's going to be it. No questions, comments, disagreements. Want to really encourage y'all to have a good evening. Stay safe out there. Talk to y'all later. Be easy.